Many people enjoy movies because you can make anything beyond your wildest imagination come true. No matter how bizarre it sounds, you can make it happen in a movie. And sometimes that just takes you out of reality and you think that could never happen to me. However, there are some cases in the world where the most bizarre thing you can think of has actually happened to some real people. And so in this video, I'm going to be going through 3 stories that get progressively more bizarre, and you think, how can that happen? But they actually happened in real life. So without any further ado, let's get into the stories that you wouldn't believe are actually real. Mia Washington was just like any other normal person. She was living in Dallas, Texas with her partner James Harrison, and everything seemed normal for the couple. One day, Mia found out she was pregnant, and presumably the couple was ecstatic about having a child in 9 months, so they probably did the usual thing of getting everything ready for when the baby arrives, making sure you have all the clothes, have all the equipment, and just doing everything that couples do when you've got a baby on the way. So anyway, 9 months has passed, and Mia goes to the hospital to give birth to the child. However, as she was giving birth, she got a lot more than she bargained for, when just 7 minutes after having the first child, she actually gave birth to a second child. Now this was weird, because Mia didn't know that she was going to have twins, but the couple just thought, you know what, yeah, it's double the work, but it's fine, we're going to have the kids anyway, we're going to raise them, we're going to love them, and we're going to do everything we can for them, it doesn't matter. And so, Mia and James, instead of having the one child that they expected, ended up having twins that were born 7 minutes apart from each other, and they were called Jordan and Justin. And so, the pair decided to raise the 2 children, and everything seemed fine, they seemed like a happy family. Until about 11 months into the babies being born, James noticed something was a little off with one of the children. Even though both of the children were born 7 minutes apart from each other, they looked totally different, despite only being 7 minutes apart from each other. Now, it could have just been possible that they weren't identical twins, but were still twins, but James decided he wanted to speak to Mia anyway, just to see if she could help him clarify to see what was going on. And so, James spoke to Mia, and while speaking to her, he found out that she actually had an affair 2 days after she had previously slept with James just before getting pregnant. And so that meant that when she got pregnant, there was a slight chance that James might not even be the father. And so, with this new knowledge, James decided that they should get a paternity test for the children just to see and make sure that the children are actually his children. And so, after a while of waiting, they ended up getting the letter back in the mail, and what they read made James feel devastated. It turns out that even though the babies were born just 7 minutes apart from each other, only one of the children was actually James's biological child, whilst the other had a 0.01% chance of being his child. It turns out that even though both of the babies were born just 7 minutes apart from each other, that only Jordan was James's biological son, whereas Justin had no relation to him whatsoever. The paternity test said that there was a 0.001% chance of James being Justin's biological father. Now, the couple was obviously confused and shocked at this news because the babies were born just 7 minutes apart from each other, so how could this have happened? How is one child James's, but the other one just not James's at all? It turns out that there's a phenomenon that can happen called hyperpaternal superfecundation, which means that the mother can give birth to twins, but both of the children actually have different fathers. You see, every month, a woman releases an egg from her ovaries, which is used to be fertilised to create a baby. However, for Mia, when she ended up producing the eggs, instead of producing just the one, she actually produced 2 eggs, which meant that she had double the eggs that a normal woman would have. And so that meant that when Mia slept with James, her partner, his sperm went to one of the eggs, and then just a couple days later when she slept with the other guy, his sperm went to one of the other eggs, fertilising the 2 eggs. And so what this means for Jordan and Justin is that even though they were both born by the same mother just 7 minutes apart from each other, they are technically not twins, but are in fact half-brothers because one of them is James's son, whilst the other is the person that Mia had an affair with, son. Now, even though James was obviously upset and devastated about this news, he decided that he would still raise both of the children as his own children, as he still felt like both children were in fact his. If you do want to read this story a little bit more, I'm going to leave a link of it, it'll be the first link in the description, and you can read more about it there. On July 21st in 1974, in Bermuda's capital Hamilton, There was a 17-year-old boy named Neville Ebbing who was riding his moped down the streets. As he was riding his moped, he got to a little intersection in the streets and was unfortunately struck by a cab which killed him almost instantly. Now Neville had a younger brother, and when Neville passed away, he ended up leaving the moped to his brother. Just 1 year after this tragic accident happened, so on the exact same day, July 21st, but now in 1975, his brother, known as Erskine Lawrence Ebbing, was riding the moped down the same street just a year later. And so as Erskine is riding the moped down the street, he's approaching the same intersection that his brother was killed at the year before, and Erskine too is unfortunately hit by a cab and passes away immediately. Now you may think this is strange already, the fact that Erskine was killed exactly a year after his brother's death on the same moped and on the same street, but it gets even weirder than that. In fact, people have said that time-wise, it happened about 50 minutes apart from each other just a year in the future. But the thing that makes this story even more unbelievable is that when Erskine was hit by the cab, he too was 17 years old at the time, but also he was hit by the exact same cab being driven by the exact same person that was carrying the exact same passenger as a year before. Now, there are people out there who are skeptical and say that this just isn't a coincidence, because Bermuda's landmass is 173 acres and only has a population of about 2,000 people as of 2010. So the number of people that are driving cabs and the number of people who are taking cabs is extremely low. And so the probability of this actually happening is probably quite high considering the size of the actual place that it happened. But either way, however you look at it, it's a very, very sad tragedy and it's got some bizarre coincidences that happen in it. If you do want to look up the story, it is called The Twin Tragedy of Hamilton, and again it will be linked in the description below. On July 12, 1961, a boy by the name of Robert Shafran, also known as Bobby, was born. He grew up as a son of a very prominent doctor, and the doctor's wife was a very well-known attorney. He grew up in a place called Scarsdale, which is a very wealthy suburb in the north of Manhattan. His life growing up was fairly standard. He did everything that kids do, like going to school, playing with other kids, just the usual stuff that kids do on a day-to-day basis. As soon as Bobby finished high school, he decided that he wanted to do more with his life and pursue a career. And so, when he was 18 years old, Bobby joined a community college in 1980. The college that he had decided to attend was at Sullivan County Community College, which is one of the 64 campuses of the State University of New York. Now, Bobby was really excited to be going to college and starting this new chapter in his life, but he was probably very nervous as well because he's going to a new place with a load of new people, he doesn't really know anyone, he doesn't know if he'll fit in. But either way, he perked himself up, was getting excited for it, and he was like, you know what, this is going to be great, I'm doing something that I enjoy, this is going to be fine. And so, he decided to go into the community college, and as soon as he entered, everyone was going up to him and greeting him like an old friend. There were girls that were going up to him and kissing him, guys were going up and patting him on the back, and just giving him all this attention. Now, Bobby was obviously really excited and happy to be getting all this attention given to him, but then he started to think it was a little bit weird because he didn't know any of these people, and they're all coming up to him, they're patting him on the back, they're being overly friendly with him. And the thing that made it worse is that everyone was calling him Eddie instead of Bobby, so he just thought it was a bit weird. But anyway, he carried on with his day, kept checking out his surroundings, started to get used to the community college. All meanwhile, people were coming up to him, greeting him just like an old friend. Eventually, whilst he was roaming the college, he bumped into this guy that also greeted him as Eddie. However, this guy decided to ask Bobby if his name was actually Eddie, to which Bobby obviously said, "No, my name's Bobby, but people keep coming up to me today and calling me Eddie for some reason." Now, the guy that Bobby had just bumped into was actually a friend of the real person called Eddie, and he knew that Eddie was no longer at the community college. And so the guy, being friends with Eddie, decided that he'd give Eddie a call just to let him know this bizarre thing that's happening right in front of him, even though Eddie's not there. And so, he gets out his phone, gives Eddie a call, and as soon as Eddie picks up, Bobby can hear over the phone that it's himself. Like, he can hear his voice. So you've just got to imagine the shock that Bobby was feeling at that moment. People have been going up to him all day, giving him pats and greets, calling him Eddie, and now he's on the phone with a guy called Eddie, and they have the exact same voice. Like, this isn't just a coincidence, this is strange. So, after a little while of talking on the phone with Eddie, the friend and Bobby decide, you know what, let's go and see Eddie. So they get in the car, drive up to Eddie's house, and on the journey, they're talking, saying what's going on, and then they eventually get up to Eddie's house. Now when they got there, Bobby was obviously feeling anxious because all day he'd been called Eddie by all these people at the college, and also he heard the guy's voice, so he's right outside Eddie's house right now. He doesn't know what's going to happen. But either way, he gets the courage, goes up to the door, knocks on the door, and when the door opens and Eddie stood there, Bobby doesn't know what to say. It's just like looking directly into a mirror. What he saw in front of him was Eddie, who looked identical to him. Like, their face, their hair, everything about them was the exact same. So after a couple of seconds of awkward silence, they both started talking, and it was found out that they actually both shared the same birthday as well. In fact, after just 6 months of being born in the hospital together, they were separated at birth and were adopted by different families. So this was obviously a huge shock to both of them. Just by sheer luck of Bobby choosing that community college and getting recognised by a load of people calling him Eddie, he has now been reunited with his long-lost brother from 18 years ago. However, this isn't the part of the story that makes it unbelievable. So after they'd reunited and found out that they were actually twins, this was everywhere. It was all over the news, everyone was talking about it. No matter where you went, people were talking about the twins that were finally reunited after birth. The story got so big, in fact, that a TV news reporter decided, you know what, we're going to broadcast this on TV. So he was doing the news, was telling the story of these two twin brothers, showed their picture on the screen, and it got all the way to Brooklyn, where this other man named David was watching the news, and instantly he recognised the faces of the boys. Without any hesitation, David said that he wanted to contact Eddie, and so he got Eddie's phone number, he called Eddie up, but unfortunately Eddie didn't answer the phone, but Eddie's mother did, and this is what David would say when he was on the phone with her. I am the third triplet. At that point, Eddie's mum was so shocked that she just responded, oh my god, they're coming out of the woodworks. So it would turn out that Eddie and Bobby weren't actually twins, but were actually a set of triplets, and David was the third triplet. And so, after 19 years of being apart, the three finally reunited, and instantly there was a connection there. The boys talked and were just so shocked at how this has happened. By sheer coincidence of Bobby going to the community college, he found Eddie, and then by sheer coincidence of David watching the news that night, he has then also found his two other triplets. And so, this story picked up, and almost instantly, the triplets got instant fame. The story of the three identical strangers was mainstream and huge. Just the fact that these three boys had found each other by sheer coincidence, of Bobby going to the community college, of David watching the news that day, it was mental. And it turned out that all three boys actually had the same kind of interests, with wrestling, the same women, almost everything was the exact same. It turns out that after the boys were born, just 6 months later, all three of them were given up to the Louise Wise adoption service. None of them were ever told or even knew of the triplets' existence, and so they just grew up living a normal life, thinking they were the only child. Not even the parents that adopted the three boys were told that they were a set of triplets. To defend themselves, the adoption agency said that it was just easier to separate all three boys than to try and pair them with the same family, because no one really wants to look after three kids all at once. However, in 1994, it was discovered that this was actually all planned, and was part of a secret experiment. In this experiment, they would take sets of twins or triplets that had been put up for adoption, and would purposely put them into different socio-economic families to see if they'd grow up differently based off of their parents' income or their different backgrounds and stuff like that. And really, it was just a messed up thing for twins and triplets to go through. We're not sure if this did affect the boys, or if it was something else entirely, but growing up, all three boys did suffer with mental health issues, more specifically Eddie. After finding out they were sets of triplets, Eddie took it the hardest because he then thought that his thoughts weren't his own, his opinion wasn't his own, and his life was now no longer his because he's sharing it with his brothers, and also he's now famous. He didn't know what to do with this newfound knowledge. And so after suffering a manic depression, he tragically committed suicide in 1995. The other two brothers did have a little bit of strain on their relationship, especially after Eddie's tragic death. But they are now on much better terms with each other after talking it out and just getting to grips with what's happened. And in 2018, they did release a documentary called Three Identical Strangers. So if you want to know more about the story, I would recommend checking out the documentary. It came out in 2018 and it's a really good watch. Also, if you want to read more about the story, I will link a news article in the description below for you guys to check out. So that's it, guys. That is 3 stories that are so unbelievable you wouldn't believe they were real. If you want to check out more of these kind of videos, I'm going to be doing some more in the future. I have a few lined up that I want to do. This is the first of hopefully many stories that I'm going to do. If you guys have any stories that you want me to read or research into and make into a video, then please leave it in the comments below and I will definitely take a look at it. Also, if you like horror narrations or anything like that, I will also link my Let's Not Meet playlist in the description below for you guys, where I read scary stories of people interacting with creepy people or ghosts, anything of that nature. So check that out as well, that will be linked in the description below for you guys. And so, if anyone ever tells you something that's happened and you don't believe them, just remember these stories. Sometimes it may seem like it's over the top, but it could actually happen. Anyway, for now, I have been your host Daniel, and have a good night.